You should mention
pre-dynastic.
The statue faces and the symmetry. How can you possibly do that by hand? This will wow you.
Yeah. So there's a whole category of aspects to the discussion around ancient technology, right? And I have to be kind of careful about what you say, oh, it is or it isn't, because in reality, we really haven't analysed that many artifacts. This vase work that we've done, first one we've actually taken a look at, that core, that's the first one and the only one that's really been analysed. So I characterize something that's beyond the capabilities of these primitive ancient civilizations as being, okay, machining marks, tool marks, like these giant circular saws, tube drills, precision, and there's elements to precision, and one of those is symmetry. And there's been some interesting studies done on the faces of giant statues. One in particular is the face of Ramses. There's a statue at Luxor. They've since put the head back up. It's up now 30 feet in the air on top of the statue, but it used to be on the ground. And again, Chris Dunn was real seminal in this. He went and took a photo, like bang on, like very front on. And then what he did was you take a copy of that photo, you make it 50% transparent, make the original 50% transparent, you take one and you flip it like on that horizontal axis, then you overlay them, right? So you would see like the left to right. It's like overlaying the left side on the right side. And it's perfect. It's this face here, but I wonder if you can find the picture of Chris Dunn. That's actually
There's your video right there.
Videos there as well, where I get into it.
Website, but it's not that picture you're asking for.
No, it's similar, but it shows other aspects of the same radius of tool being used to cut. But what's interesting about the symmetry? It's perfectly symmetrical, left to right. Now, this isn't a feature in humans. No human is perfectly symmetrical. Different nostrils, different eyeballs. It's also not something that is done in artwork. So, people often say, well, Michelangelo, he carved David. It's a beautiful statue. I've seen it's incredible, but it's human. It's not symmetrical. Symmetrical is, you can't achieve that degree of symmetry just by eyeballing it and doing it by hand. And it's also something that's not really human. I think some of these statues almost look a bit inhuman because of that symmetry when they're up there and they're staring at you, because it's mind-blowing to actually go and look at them. But it's the other aspect is the most efficient way to create that would be to say, well, if you were going to design it in a computer, it's like, well, I'm going to create half this face in a program and map it out, and then I'm just going to reverse it and say, well, that's the other half. It's literally the most efficient way to do it, and that's kind of what we're seeing in some of these statues.
Go back to that image, please.
It's virtual perfection.
And what's the explanation for this that modern archaeologists use?
They did it by hand, right?
They do it by hand. That's literally what they say. You just don't. They're not engineers and construction experts at the end of the day. That's the problem. So it's very difficult to engage them on those specific details. And I've taken many engineers, master stonemasons, stone carvers, construction guys, and a lot of them see it immediately. People that understand what it takes to both work in this material and to work at the scale that some of this stuff is worked in. They see it immediately, and they just dismiss the idea that this was done with literally pounding stones and, copper chisels. It's a funny thing. They insist those things are how they were done, but not once, no one ever has cut a single big slab of granite the size of a refrigerator in half. We've never gone that far. No one's demonstrated that, yep, you can take a copper bar and sand and grind your way through a refrigerator-sized block.
And you're saying copper because we think that they didn't have steel back then.
They didn't. Well, they didn't, and not until later. There's no evidence for it. There's evidence for copper and bronze.
There's no evidence for it when we're talking about 2500 BC.
Exactly.
Now, if there was some sort of very sophisticated civilization that was tens of thousands of years before that, and they were wiped out, and then you're leaving behind these artifacts, and then people are claiming them as their own, and then trying to copy them.
Imitation was a huge part of it, and we even see that. You go to the Egyptian Museum, and there's these beautiful igneous stone vases made of granite, and right next to them, in the same display, because they're found in the same place, there's a rough pottery vase that's not even turned, just put together by hand, and they've painted it with dots to make it look like granite, and it's shaped the same way as the granite vase. That's pure imitation. Like this here. I love this. This is one of my favorite examples. And this is like either first dynasty or pre-dynastic. But yeah, you have a hard igneous stone vessel made with perfection, and right next to what's clearly an imitation of it made from pottery, and they've even dotted it up to make it look like granite.
all the most sophisticated artifacts, pyramids, everything are all the oldest. It gets worse as it goes on, and that's not supposed to make sense. And like when last time I was on with you, Joe, I was trying to articulate a point, which was that there was, a Middle Kingdom, there was the First Kingdom, there was and there was these periods of revolt and revolution and missing history within Egypt, and there's 3 different kingdoms, and one of which was 126 years of lost history, another was over 200 years. And the one point to mention about that is that means that whoever took over and reestablished themselves, there's now no one alive at that period of time that was around prior to whatever it is that reset them, that government or whatever they were.
Yeah.
So if there's 126 years of lost history, no one is now alive to say what was what before that year 1 of 126 years, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's 3,000 years. Like the dynastic Egyptian civilization itself is 3,000 years old. Now, they do trace that back 30+ thousand years. They describe a time, Zep Tepi, when the gods walked the earth. They literally talk about these magical abilities that you could interpret as technology. And then after that, there was the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, these semi-divine mystical beings. And they have a list of kings and rulers that go back into that time. It's only in our interpretation and our archaeologists that really say, well, you know what, that's just myth and legend. And after that, we start Dynasty 1, King 1. That's actually history.
But what is their justification? Like, why do they say that it's just myth and legend? Like, where are they getting this information from?
Well,
why are they making these?
Well, because civilization can't exist until 6,000 years ago. It says it right here, Joe. Memorize it.
But once they see Göbekli Tepe, don't they kind of have to
They should
formulate?
They refuse. They're like they say they're primitive.
They say Göbekli Tepe was created by. They changed it, and it literally happened. I saw this argument being made when Michael Sherman was here with Graham and Randall. They say it's made by hunter-gatherers. They literally changed the definition of what it means to be a hunter-gatherer, rather than move that precious date of civilization starting from 6,000 years ago to 10,000 years ago with Göbekli Tepe. And I think it's ridiculous. Göbekli Tepe, you cannot produce that type of installation without civilization, right? You just so many things. The specialization of allowing someone to be able to carve, 18-foot pillars that weigh several tons.
Not just that, but relief. The fact that these animals on those pillars are 3D.
Yeah.
Meaning you carve out the stone to remove stone so that you have these giant pillars with like a lizard crawling up the side of it, but the lizard extends out from the stone.
Yeah, high relief.
It's not carved into it. I mean, that's just insane.
Yeah.
And as difficult as possible.
And you need, you need a population base to support this sort of the development of specialization like that. To me, it's as if they just think, well, no, these hunter-gatherers, these dudes just want to get around on the weekends, get away from the women, go and do some rock, little carving project on the weekend. We'll move some stones over here. And it's not just stone circles. There's buildings and cisterns and quarries.
Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.